My dear Scorpio, not every career path is built for the same kind of person, and the ones that were not built for you tend to make that fact known in a very particular way. The work feels shallow. The conversations stay on the surface. People around you seem satisfied with explanations that you know are incomplete, with outcomes that technically close the matter but do not actually resolve it. You sit in meetings where the real issue is not being discussed, where everyone is performing agreement while the actual problem continues underneath, and something in you goes quietly, persistently restless. That restlessness is not impatience. It is your professional instincts telling you that you are operating well below the depth you are capable of. That signal is worth listening to. Scorpio is a fixed water sign ruled by Pluto, with Mars as its traditional co-ruler. In plain professional terms, that combination produces something that is genuinely uncommon. Pluto governs transformation, hidden structures, power, and the things beneath the surface of any situation that explain everything the surface conceals. Mars contributes drive, strategic focus, and the willingness to move into territory that makes other people hesitate. Fixed water means you pursue a goal with a kind of sustained, quiet intensity that does not announce itself, but does not stop either. You do not sprint. You do not waver. You go deep, you stay long, and you tend to emerge from difficult professional experiences with a level of understanding that only comes from having refused to look away. That is a rare professional profile. The careers that deserve it are the ones that actually require it. The first field worth considering seriously is psychology, psychiatry, and the broader world of mental health and behavioral investigation. This covers clinical psychology, psychotherapy, psychiatric medicine, forensic psychology, behavioral analysis, and the research disciplines that seek to understand why human beings do what they do beneath the explanations they offer for it. For Scorpio, this is not just a comfortable professional fit. It is a field that finally asks the same questions you have been asking your whole life and takes the answers seriously. Pluto gives Scorpio an almost structural orientation toward the hidden. Not in a mystical sense, in a deeply practical one. You notice the gap between what people say and what they mean. You track what is not being said in a conversation as carefully as what is. You understand intuitively that the stated reason for a behavior is rarely the complete reason, and that the complete reason is usually more interesting and more useful than the one being offered. Those perceptual habits are the foundation of every good clinical practice and every productive behavioral investigation. In a therapy room or an assessment context, that quality of perception is not just helpful. It is the job. Fixed water in a clinical setting means you can hold sustained attention on emotionally difficult material without flinching, deflecting, or rushing the process. Many people who enter the mental health professions discover that bearing witness to genuine psychological pain is harder than they anticipated. Scorpio tends to discover the opposite. The gravity of the work is not a burden. It is what makes the work feel worth doing. That capacity to remain present and functional in the presence of genuine darkness is one of the most important qualities a mental health professional can possess. Here is the scene. A client has been in therapy for several months. They have been articulate, cooperative, and apparently engaged. But the thing they came in to address has not shifted. The presenting problem is still there, exactly where it was. Most clinicians would review the treatment plan, consider different approaches, perhaps question the fit. You do something different. You sit with the pattern. You notice that every time the conversation approaches a specific period in the client's history, something subtle changes. A slight shift in posture. A joke that redirects the topic. A sudden interest in the clock. You name it. Not accusingly, observationally. You say, quietly, that you have noticed the conversation tends to move away from a particular place. And you ask, simply, what is there? The silence that follows is the longest one in months. And then something finally opens. That moment did not come from a technique. It came from the refusal to be satisfied with the surface explanation when the real one was still waiting underneath. Long-term, What Scorpio builds in psychology and behavioral work is a clinical depth that becomes increasingly difficult to find elsewhere as the field professionalizes and systematizes. You resist the pressure to reduce human complexity to a checklist. You continue asking the harder question even when the easier one has already been answered. Over years, that commitment to depth produces a body of clinical knowledge that colleagues and supervisors recognize as something that cannot be acquired through training alone. It has to be earned through sustained, honest attention. You earn it. Here is where to start. If this field draws you and you are not yet formally in it, begin reading the foundational texts of psychological theory, not the popular summaries, but the primary works. Pick one theorist whose framework genuinely interests you and go deep. Then find a supervised volunteer role in a mental health adjacent setting, a crisis line, a community support program, a hospital auxiliary. The goal is contact with genuine human psychological need before the credential, not after. That sequence tends to produce better clinicians and more honest decisions about whether this path is truly yours. The second career path that tends to suit Scorpio at a deep level is investigation, intelligence, and the security professions. This covers criminal investigation, intelligence analysis, cybersecurity, fraud examination, risk assessment, and the research and analytical roles within law enforcement, government agencies, and private security organizations. What connects all of these fields is a single professional requirement: the ability to find what has been deliberately hidden and understand its significance. For most people, that task is exhausting and often frightening. For Scorpio, it tends to be the condition under which your mind functions at its sharpest. Pluto governs hidden power and the structures that operate beneath visible surfaces. In an investigative context, that translates into a natural ability to identify the discrepancy that reveals the deception, to follow a thread of inconsistency through layers of misdirection, and to remain focused on a line of inquiry long after other investigators have accepted the official account and moved on. Mars contributes the strategic focus and the tolerance for adversarial conditions that investigative work consistently produces. You are not destabilized by resistance. Resistance, for Scorpio, tends to function as confirmation that you are getting close to something worth finding. Fixed water in an intelligence or investigative environment means you are exceptionally good at the long game. You do not need the case to break quickly. You can hold an open question for months, returning to it methodically, adding each new piece of information to a mental architecture that keeps growing until the full picture finally becomes visible. That kind of sustained investigative patience is not common. Most people need resolution on a shorter timeline than the work allows. You can wait. Picture this moment. You are reviewing materials on a case or an investigation that has officially been considered resolved. Everyone else has moved on. The conclusion was reasonable on the surface and the paperwork was clean. But something about it has stayed with you. A piece that did not quite fit the stated explanation. A timeline that required one assumption too many. So you go back, quietly on your own time, without making it a declaration. And you find it, not buried dramatically, sitting in plain sight in a document that everyone else read and moved past. The thing that changes everything. You bring it forward with the evidence laid out methodically, without drama, and the case reopens. That is Scorpio's investigative instinct in its most essential form. You did not manufacture the inconsistency. You simply refused to stop seeing it. Over a long career in investigative and security fields, what Scorpio develops is a professional reputation for finding the thing that should not be findable. Colleagues stop being surprised by it. Supervisors begin routing the most complex and sensitive matters in your direction, not because you are the most credentialed person in the room, but because you are the one most likely to surface the truth when the truth has been carefully arranged to stay hidden. That reputation, once established, tends to define an entire career. This is the move to make. If investigation or intelligence analysis interests you, begin developing your analytical pattern recognition skills through formal study in one adjacent discipline. Forensic accounting, behavioral analysis, intelligence studies, information security. Pick the lane that intersects most naturally with your existing background and go deep in its methodology. Then find one professional organization in that field and attend their meetings or read their publications consistently. Understanding how practitioners in your target field actually think is the most direct preparation you can do before entering it formally. The third path worth naming is research, surgery, and the high-stakes technical specializations where the margin for error is genuinely small and the depth of required expertise is genuinely large. This covers surgical medicine, scientific research in specialized fields, forensic pathology, advanced engineering, and any professional context where the work demands total concentration, comfort with complexity, and the willingness to go further into a subject than most practitioners ever reach. What these fields share is not just technical difficulty. It is the requirement that the person doing the work actually care about the precision. That caring cannot be faked at the level these fields demand. Scorpio tends to bring it without effort. Pluto rules transformation and the irreversible. In a surgical or high-stakes technical context, that orientation toward permanence and consequence produces a quality of focus that is difficult to teach. You understand, in a way that is more than intellectual, that what you do in this setting matters. That understanding does not produce anxiety in Scorpio the way it might in other signs. It produces a kind of locked-in concentration that makes you more capable, not less, when the stakes are at their highest. Mars contributes the precision and the tactical clarity to act decisively in conditions where hesitation is its own form of error. Fixed water means you are built for the long preparation that elite technical specializations require. The years of training, the accumulated hours of practice, the incremental development of skill through repetition that does not feel glamorous while it is happening, but produces a level of mastery that nothing else can substitute for. You do not resent the depth of preparation that these fields require. You tend to respect it, because you understand that the depth of the preparation is precisely what makes the work worth doing. Here is the scene. You are in a high-stakes technical situation that has developed a complication. The procedure or the process has encountered something that was not anticipated. Most people in that situation feel the pull of the complication emotionally. It interrupts their concentration. It introduces doubt. For you, the opposite happens. The complication narrows your focus. Everything peripheral disappears. You are operating entirely in the present tense of the problem, your full attention on the exact thing in front of you, and you work through it methodically and without panic. Afterward, colleagues will describe your composure in a way that sounds like praise. You will find it slightly puzzling, because from the inside, it did not feel like composure. It felt like clarity. The distinction is real and it matters. Over a long career in technical specialization, what Scorpio builds is a mastery that becomes its own form of authority. You do not need to announce your expertise. It becomes visible through the quality of your outcomes and the difficulty of the problems you take on. Younger practitioners seek your guidance not because you're the most approachable person in the field, but because the depth of your knowledge is unmistakable to anyone who has tried to develop comparable depth themselves. That quiet technical authority is one of the most enduring forms of professional standing that exists. It does not depend on visibility or politics or the favor of any particular institution. It belongs entirely to you. Here is how to move toward this path. Identify the most technically demanding version of the field you are considering and find out exactly what the pathway into it requires. Not the general pathway, the specific one. The prerequisite studies, the licensing requirements, the training programs that practitioners in that specialization actually recommend to each other. Then begin the first step of that pathway, not to commit to the entire journey yet, but to find out whether the depth of the preparation activates you or discourages you. For most Scorpios drawn to these fields, the answer is immediate and it points clearly in one direction. Before you move on from this, take a genuine moment with what you just heard. Of those three fields, psychology and behavioral investigation, intelligence, and the investigative professions, and high-stakes technical specialization, which one felt like a description of how you already think every day in whatever work you are doing now? Which one names something about your professional instincts that you have not heard named clearly before? And which one arrived from an angle you did not expect and left you sitting with a question you were not planning to ask yourself today? Leave a comment telling me which path resonated most deeply. Or tell me which field you are already working in and whether this description matched what the work actually demands of you. Those first-hand accounts from people doing the real work are what makes a community like this genuinely worth building. If this kind of honest, sign-specific vocational reflection is useful to you, subscribing means more of it continues to find its way to you. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Have a blessed day.